Alright, today I'll be demonstrating how to perform a basic inspection on a cooling system. We're also going to perform a pressure testing of this cooling system and also on the radiator cap. Alright, so we're going to start our inspection by checking the upper radiator hose. Right, so what are we checking the upper radiator hose for? So we're looking for any visible signs of cracks or holes in the radiator hose here. So we want, right? So look at it. So you also want to squeeze the radiator hose to ensure that it is not soft or mushy, right? Not too soft, right? Also want to check that it is properly secured to the thermostat hose in here, that the clamps are properly tightened, right? So likewise for the clamp to the radiator, the upper radiator tank here. We also want to check the lower radiator hose for the same thing. So we want to squeeze it, right, to check for any brittleness or any hardness of the radiator hose. We also want to check the radiator clamps, right, radiator hose clamps, to see that they are properly secured, right, properly securing the hoses to the engine here. And likewise for the lower one, the lower radiator hose clamp down there. Alright, so now that we have inspected the hoses, now we're going to turn our attention to this hose here, this overflow hose here that is connected to the radiator neck going to our overflow reservoir. So I want to check it to see that it is properly secured to the radiator neck here, and also properly secured to the overflow reservoir. We also want to check the overflow reservoir, right, the level of the coolant within the reservoir. And our overflow reservoir here, there are two marks, a low mark and a full mark, right? So you don't want your coolant to be above the full mark all the way up here. You want it exactly at this mark right here. You don't want it below the low mark either. So we also can open the reservoir to check the condition of the coolant is inside here, and the coolant looks pretty okay. So we start back our cap, right, secure back our hoses there, right. So now that we have checked the overflow reservoir, now we're going to do a visual inspection also of the radiator itself. So this radiator here that we have here is a downflow radiator. So we're going to start off by checking the upper radiator tank. So we're looking for any visible signs of cracks or holes within the radiator, right? So we also want to do likewise for the lower radiator hose, the lower radiator tank. So we want to check that also, right? We also want to check the radiator core itself. So what are we checking the radiator core for? We're looking for any visible signs of debris, right, clogging the dirt, trash or leaves or anything of that sort, clogging the core of the radiator. So by our visual inspection here, we're not seeing anything clogging up the core of this radiator here. But what we're seeing though is that the fins of the radiator here, right, the fins of the radiator here is a little bit damaged, right? So we probably need to get this rectified. So we also want to check the radiator fan shrouds to see that they are properly mounted to the radiator itself. As you can see that this one here is not properly mounted, right? So we need to have this sorted out, because if the radiator fan shroud is not properly mounted, this can lead to our engine overheating, right? Because what the radiator fan shroud does, it allows when the radiator fan pulls the air in through the radiator core, it allows the air to be concentrated around the core of the radiator itself to remove the maximum amount of heat from the coolant that is passing through the radiator core tubes. I also want to check this this fan mount, this radiator fan shroud over here, right? This one seems to be proper, not properly mounted, but it's better than this one over here. Then now we're going to check the radiator fan motor electrical connections. But before we do this, we want to ensure that we disconnect the negative battery cable. The reason for doing that, we don't want our fans to start up accidentally while we're checking them. And we're going to have our fingers near the fans, and if the fans should start up accidentally, they can cause serious injuries to our fingers. Right, so we want to check the electrical wires to the fan, or any visible signs of any cracks nor any breakage within the wires. I also want to check the connections are properly secured. Right, the connectors here. This wire here needs to be routed properly, so we would have to go and route this wire here properly afterwards. I also want to check this one over here also. Right, looking for any visible signs or any breakage of any wiring, that the connector is properly secured. Right, and as you can see here, this radiator fan motor wires are properly secured. Alright, so now that we have done our visual inspection on most of the components here, right now we are going to pressure test the cooling system. Right, so we are going to pressure test the cooling system, so we're going to remove our radiator cap. So we're going to look at our radiator cap, right, to ascertain the amount of pressure that should be applied to the system. Another way that we can find out the amount of pressure that should be applied to the cooling system is by checking with your service manual. Right? So looking at this radiator cap here, we are seeing a 0.9 on this radiator cap. This 0.9 is telling us that the pressure rating of this radiator cap is 0.9 bars. So you know that pressure can be measured in bars, psi, and kPa. So those are some general units for measuring pressure. So now we are going to convert, because our pressure testers that we are going to use today, they are not denoted in bars but in kPa and kilopascal. So we're going to convert from bars to psi for our case here. So this 0.9 bars is roughly about 13.5, 14 psi thereabout. Right? And one important factor that I failed to mention earlier, whenever you are working on the cooling system, you have to ensure that the cooling system is off, that the engine is off, the engine is cooled. You don't want to work on a hot engine or a hot cooling system, right, because that can cause serious injuries. So now we're going to get our cooling system pressure tester. So we have two pressure testers here. We have this one, we also have this one, so we can use either. Alright, so I'm going to use in this video here this pressure tester here. It is a little bit more simpler for me to use. Alright, so I'm going to get the connections. Alright, so I'm going to find the required adapter here. So I'm going to use this adapter to attach to the radiator neck. But before I can attach the adapter here to the radiator neck, what I'm going to do, right, I'm going to top the cooling system off, a little bit of coolant before pressure test the system. So I'm going to get my coolant here. Right, so this is distilled water. Don't have a 50-50 mixture of water and antifreeze readily at hand right now. I have some distilled water. So it's going to top off the cooling system. Right, just like that. So now we are also going to apply a little bit of the coolant to the rubber seal here on the adapter here. So what this does, it enables the adapter here to form a proper seal, right, to the radiator neck you're ready to install. So installing the adapter just like that. So we are going to install the connections like so. Install the, right, so now we are ready to apply the pressure to our cooling system. So let us get this thing here properly screwed on, so we don't want it to be cross threaded. Alright, so now we can go ahead now and apply the around 13 psi pressure based on what the radiator cap denotes. So we're just going to pump. We're going to pump all the way up. As you can see, our needle is taking a little bit of time to get to that 13 psi mark. What that indicates for us is that we have a leak somewhere within the system. So if we should look somewhere down here, there's a leak at the radiator lower radiator tank there. So now we're going to raise the multimeter up to check for the exact location of that. We're also going to place our cap on to get spills. The motor vehicle. So we should look around here. So a leak seems to be coming from the radiator tank somewhere up at this point here near the core. So we probably need to get this radiator here either replaced or fixed. Right, so now that we have found where our leak is, now we are going to go ahead and pressure test the radiator cap. So it makes no sense we pressure test the cooling system any further because there's a leak within the system. Right, so now we're going to lower the motor vehicle up a bit. We're going to release the safety latch. So if our cooling system was able to maintain a pressure, our needle would not be falling, right? So if our cooling system was able to maintain a pressure, the needle would be steady at that 13 to 14 psi marker right here. Right? So because we're unable to maintain a pressure because there's a leak within the system, an external leak, right? The needle is falling, so we're all the way down at that 4 psi mark here, right? So we're just going to release that small amount of pressure that's left, and what we are going to do now, we are going to pressure test the radiator cap, see if it is holding pressure, if it can maintain that pressure and also release excess pressure. So we're going to get our adapter, the radiator pressure cap adapter. Right, so we're going to use this adapter here, right? And we're going to install our radiator cap to this adapter here. We're also going to get this adapter here from our pressure testing kit and install it to our adapter. But before we go ahead and do that, we need to wet, right, apply some coolant. In this case here, distilled water, to put the seals of the radiator cap there and the pressure tester adapter here. Right, so we're going to go ahead now and install, just like so. We're going to install our cap. So this is how we make the connections. So now we're going to install our pressure tester, and we're going to apply about that same 13 to 14 psi. Right, so we're going to pump it up. If our cap is a good functioning cap, right, it should be maintaining that pressure at that 14 psi marker there. Right, so we're at 14 psi, and as you can see, the needle is not falling back. So it indicated that the cap is holding pressure. Right, and it can hold that pressure. So now it is holding pressure. We know that it is holding pressure, but is it really releasing excess pressure? Right? So what we're going to do, we're going to bring it up above that 14 psi mark to about 16, 17 psi. And if it is able to release excess pressure, you should see the needle drop back to that 14 psi mark and hold it. Right? So it was at 17 there, and it is now dropping back to that 14 psi marker. So a cap is able to release excess pressure. So this cap is a good functioning cap. So let's release the pressure here. So now we're going to pack away back all our tools and equipment. We're going to clean up any spills that we have created. So we're going to so we have some newspaper here to clean up the spills and so on. So that's it for pressure testing a cooling system and performance basic inspection on the